Would you embrace death with a smile? Picture a trembling hand marked by hunger and fever, offering a rosary to the very person holding the needle of death. That hand doesn't curse, it doesn't resist, it doesn't beg. It simply asks, "Pray for me." This isn't fiction, it's not metaphor, this is a true story, and what will be revealed at the end might just change your faith forever. Because his name is nearly forgotten, but his heart burned with a light not even a concentration camp could extinguish. Titus Brandsma was just a Carmelite friar, a journalist, an intellectual, a frail, sick man who believed more in the power of words than in the weapons of men. But the hell of World War II would test the limits of one man's faith, and at the center of it all, God's silence and a nurse holding the final syringe. You must stay until the end, because this story doesn't end in a gas chamber. It ends with a gesture that still echoes in heaven. If your soul already felt something in these first seconds, subscribe now to Heaven's Breath channel. This story is for you, if you've ever wondered if God still answers. And maybe he will now. Before Dachau, before the cold cells, before the lethal injection, there was a different field, not one of death, but of silence. Picture the fields of Friesland, northern Netherlands, misty skies, cows grazing under cold winds, simple homes, quiet souls. There, on February 23, 1881, Anno Brandsma was born, son of Titus and Chitia, devout Catholics in a sea of Calvinists. He wasn't born into wealth, he was born into faith, a home where Mass wasn't a duty, it was a refuge, where the Rosary was prayed through tears, where God's name was whispered with awe and trembling, a home of surrender. 5 of the 6 children entered religious life, but Anno, there was something different in his eyes, a kind of hunger, not for bread, but for meaning. At age 11, he joined a minor Franciscan seminary in Meghan. He dreamed of the habit, the altar, the cross. But his body couldn't follow. Intestinal illness forced him to abandon the Franciscan path. Imagine it. You're 13. You think God has called you, but your own body says no. That's when Anno's soul learned the price of surrender. That's when holiness began. Through frustration. But the calling didn't vanish. It simply changed paths. In 1898, Anno entered the Carmelite novitiate in Boxmeer. There he chose a new name, Titus. After his father, not just out of love, but as prophecy, because that name would one day be engraved in martyrdom. Titus professed vows in 1899, was ordained in 1905. From then on, his life blended silence, prayer, and writing. But his words weren't merely devotional, they exposed, they taught, they freed. He dove deep into Carmelite mysticism, studied Teresa of Avila, translated her works, earned a PhD in philosophy in Rome. The fragile farm boy became a giant of Christian thought. Each childhood wound fed his thirst for divine wisdom. In 1919, he founded a school. In 1923, he co-founded Nijmegen Catholic University. There he taught, led, and eventually became rector. But what impressed most wasn't his mind. It was his open door. He listened, advised, smiled, even when tired, even when sick. It was as if heaven whispered through him. But Titus wasn't naive. He saw the world darkening, and his pen became his sword. As a journalist, he warned of totalitarianism. As a priest, he defended press and education freedom. As a man, he said no to hate, with reason and prayer. And that's when he drew the fury of darkness, because the Nazi hell could not tolerate light. How can someone who loves truth survive in a world built on lies? Titus knew it wasn't enough to be against. You had to resist, even silently, even alone. In January 1942, he accepted the most dangerous mission of his life, to personally deliver a letter from the Dutch Bishops' Conference to Catholic newspaper editors. The letter made one thing clear: do not print Nazi propaganda. Do not serve evil. That was all the Nazis needed to silence him. He visited 14 editors, and on January 19th was arrested at the very convent where he had professed his vows, as if his whole life was circling back. Then began the stations of his cross, from the convent to Scheveningen prison, then Amersfoort, then Kleve. Each cell a deeper step into the abyss. Picture the freezing floor, muted screams, boots echoing through steel nights, and Titus praying with his fingers, not the fingers of a warrior, but of a martyr. His rosary was hidden, but the prayer could not be chained. Then came Dachau, the most feared concentration camp, the cemetery of the living, where faith was tested every day. Titus arrived on June 19th, weak, sick, but still shining with divine fire. A prisoner noticed, a guard noticed, even other priests whispered, "Why is he still smiling?" He smiled because he held a secret. The goal wasn't survival. It was offering every pain as sacrifice. But his body could no longer hold. His health collapsed. He was sent to the camp's infirmary, not to be healed, but to be used, injected, tested, tortured under SS experiments. And still, he brought heaven with him. The nurse, an SS woman, had administered death before. Cold, efficient, distant. But when she approached Titus, something inside her trembled. He didn't curse, didn't scream, didn't plead. He simply took a small rosary from his pocket and offered it. "Take this, pray for me." She hesitated, but accepted it, and that moment would change her life forever. Decades later, this very woman would attend his beatification. She testified, "He forgave me before he died, and I've never been the same." If this pain reminds you of something you live today, if you've ever felt like God was silent, like no one saw your fight, write "I believe" in the comments. And share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Some saints perform miracles after death. Others are the miracle Sasho while still alive. Dachau, July 1942. In the camp's infirmary, death had a schedule. Every bed, a pre-written farewell. But the Nazis miscalculated something. They could measure bones, mark wrists, weigh bodies, but they couldn't measure a heart that already belonged to heaven. Titus, feverish, wounded and fading, looked into the eyes of the SS nurse. She held the syringe. She knew what came next. She had done it before and would do it again. But this time, something different happened. With his last strength, Titus lifted his hand. In it, his old worn Carmelite rosary, and then he spoke. "Pray for me." The words didn't beg. They didn't accuse. They gave. The nurse, ready to kill, was handed an invisible weapon, a prayer. That was the miracle. The miracle wasn't that his body escaped death. It was that his soul remained in peace. Titus didn't curse, he blessed. And in that moment, amid the stench of Nazi cruelty, amid fear and madness, a piece of heaven descended. The lethal injection was given. His heart stopped, but his faith kept echoing in the hallways, because what remained was a silence that shouted, "To love is to win." Decades later, that same nurse, old now, repentant, changed, testified at his beatification. She said, "I could never look at that rosary without weeping. He forgave me before I even asked." The miracle of Titus Brandsma wasn't escaping death. It was shining light where everything was dark. A miracle forgotten by the world, but never ignored by heaven. How many times have you felt like you were fighting alone, telling the truth, while everyone told you to stay quiet, surrounded by lies, armed only with your faith? Today, we don't live in concentration camps, but we live in distraction camps, manipulation camps, noise. Truth is still censored, integrity still punished, faith still mocked. The newspapers Titus tried to save are now in our pockets. But how often are they filled with confusion, distortion, fear? Titus believed in the power of words. Where are ours today? Do they free or enslave? Do they reveal or conceal? How many times have you cried out, "God, are you even listening?" And what do you do when heaven goes quiet? Titus teaches us that even silence is an answer. Even pain can be an altar, because holiness isn't about feeling less pain, but choosing what to do with it. He was cancelled, mocked, watched, but he never stopped speaking truth, even when the price was death. Maybe you're there now, in an invisible cell. Its name could be anxiety, or guilt, or loneliness, or fear. But Titus whispers from heaven, "You are not alone. Your greatest prison may not be outside you, but in what you believe about yourself." And today, his story asks you to choose. Will you let the system define your faith, or will you keep the flame alive, even in the dark? Titus Brandsma didn't die for an idea. He died for you. If you still believe that, truth frees, prayer transforms, and forgiveness saves. And you? What will you do with the silence you carry? In Dachau's hospital, while others lost their faith, Titus kept his eyes on heaven. There were no visible angels, no celestial music, no miraculous escape, just an injection, a nurse, and a heart that chose to love to the last beat. He had no funeral, no coffin, no last words written down, but what he did have was certainty. His life didn't end there. His final gesture, giving his rosary, echoed louder than any sermon, stronger than any cry. In that dark hospital bed where so many died cursing, he died, blessing. And when the syringe pierced his skin, there was no hatred, no fear. There was silence, and within it, a yes to heaven, a yes to love, a yes to the cross. And heaven, silently, received the body of a man who had been faithful to the end. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Titus Brandsma didn't vanish in that hospital. His body may have been burned in Dachau's ovens, but his life became incense, a perfume of courage that time could not erase. Today, his story is not just memory. It's a calling to all who feel too small, too broken, too invisible to make a difference. But if a sick friar, armed only with prayers and words, could defy an empire of death, what's stopping you? The rosary he handed to his killer is now a symbol that no darkness can extinguish the light of a heart that chooses to love. That forgiveness is stronger than hatred. And yes, saints still walk among us. And you? Will you be lights in the field of shadows? Then write in the comments, Amen. Share this video with someone whose faith is fading, someone who feels God has gone quiet, someone who needs to remember the last word belongs to heaven. If your soul was touched, subscribe now to Heaven's Breath channel. Here, we tell the stories that touch the invisible to transform the now. May St. Titus Brandsma intercede for all who speak truth, who fight with love, and who, even in silence, still whisper, I believe.